What if you were captured by an alien race, thrown into a deadly maze, and forced to fight a creature built to kill only, to discover that your survival depended not on strength, but on trust? This isn't just a story about escaping danger. It's about breaking boundaries, forming the unlikeliest of bonds, and rewriting what it means to be human. If you're new here, make sure to subscribe to the channel and show a little love with a thumbs up by liking the video. Now, let's jump into the story. Cale Riven had made a career out of keeping his head down. A pilot with no military rank, no medals, and barely enough credits to keep his ship fueled. He lived by one simple rule: never fly into trouble. But on this particular morning, trouble didn't wait for him to come knocking. It tore open the sky and pulled him straight into it. His cargo vessel, the Sparrowhawk, had been cruising smoothly through a quiet corridor between lunar outposts. The job was easy: drop off tech supplies, refuel, and head home. Cale leaned back in his pilot seat, half listening to an old radio recording of Earth jazz, when suddenly his ship jolted so hard his head smacked the console. Alarms blared, warning lights flashed, and navigation systems spiraled into static. Then the music cut off. Before he could even curse, the stars outside the viewport shifted and bent unnaturally. A deep purple light filled the cockpit, casting shadows in strange shapes. Cale realized with rising panic that he wasn't drifting anymore. His ship was being pulled fast. A tractor beam. He tried the manual override. Nothing. Emergency communications? Jammed. He could only sit there as the Sparrowhawk was dragged toward a massive shadow that had appeared in space. So dark, it looked like it was swallowing light itself. The ship that took him was unlike anything Cale had ever seen. No identifiable engines, no standard design. Just sharp angles, smooth black surfaces, and violet markings glowing like scars. His vessel clunked against something solid, and then everything stopped. No more motion. Just silence. Cale jumped as his ship hissed pressurized. Someone or something was connecting an airlock. He scrambled for the emergency locker and pulled out a compact plasma cutter. Not exactly a weapon, but better than bare hands. As he turned, the door burst open with a screech of metal and 3 figures stepped in. They weren't human. Their bodies were tall and sinewy, with exoskeletal armor that seemed fused with their skin. Deep emerald eyes blinked sideways like a reptile's. Their movements were precise, practiced. One pointed what looked like a stun rifle at Cale's chest. He didn't try to fight. Instead, he slowly raised his hands and said, "All right. You got me." The leader made a series of clicks and low hisses, then gestured. The others moved in, bound his wrists with some sort of magnetic cuff, and hauled him out of his ship. Cale didn't resist. Not yet. He needed to see more. Understand. More. The alien corridors were strange wider than needed, like they were built for something larger. The walls shimmered slightly, and there was a hum in the air, like a low-frequency vibration that never quite stopped. Every few feet, strange lights blinked on and off in patterns Cale couldn't decipher. The air had a sharp, metallic taste, like breathing inside a battery. After several turns in a lift that moved without noise or motion, they arrived at a large chamber. A cold clinical room filled with monitors, alien instruments, and several more of the creatures working silently. At the center stood one who was clearly different, thinner but commanding. Its dark robe moved slightly, as if stirred by wind that didn't exist. This was no guard. This was the one in charge. The leader approached, carrying a translucent tablet filled with glowing symbols. It tapped a button, and a mechanical voice filled the room. "You are human," it said in flat, emotionless English. "Yeah," Cale replied, his voice rough. "Human, civilian, just a pilot, okay? I didn't mean to drift into your space. It was a navigation glitch. Let me go, and I'll be out of your hair tentacles, whatever. The alien stared at him for a long moment, before responding. You are not here by mistake. You are here by design. You will assist in our behavioral studies. Behavioral studies? Kale blinked. Wait, you're experimenting on me? You will survive. Or not. That is the observation. Before Kale could shout, he was dragged away again. This time into another lift, down more winding paths, until they reached a massive door sealed with glowing locks. One of the guards pressed its palm against the control panel. The door opened with a hiss, revealing what looked like a maze. Kale was shoved inside. He stumbled forward onto dusty flooring, surrounded by high walls. The door slammed shut behind him, leaving only dim, violet light and the low thrum of machinery somewhere far above. He could feel dozens of unseen eyes watching him. He turned slowly, taking in the strange layout. This wasn't just a prison. It was a test chamber. Traps? Obstacles? Something worse? His thoughts were interrupted by a new sound. A low growl. Coming from the far end of the maze, Kale squinted into the darkness. At first, he thought it was his imagination. But then something moved. Massive. Silent. Watching. The voice from earlier echoed around the chamber. We will now begin observation of your survival responses. And with that, the growl came again closer this time. Kale swallowed hard. This wasn't a rescue mission. This wasn't an accident. This was a test. Kale Riven kept his back against the cold metal wall, his breath shallow and quiet. The growling had stopped, but that didn't mean the danger was gone. Somewhere beyond the maze's next corner, something was watching him. He could feel it. The alien ship had gone silent, except for the low hum in the walls and the faint buzz of hidden energy sources. The purple lights overhead flickered now and then, making the shadows dance. Every flicker made Kale's heart jump. He slowly crept forward, one foot carefully in front of the other. The maze walls were tall and curved, made from the same dark metal as the rest of the ship. The floor was covered in a thin layer of dry, shifting sand. It made every step tricky. One wrong move and he'd give away his position. He stopped at a corner and peeked around it. Nothing. Just more winding passages. But then, out of the corner of his eye, something moved, something low and large. Kale ducked back and pressed his hands against the wall to steady himself. He couldn't run. He had nowhere to go. If the creature was fast, it would catch him in seconds. He didn't have a weapon, just a tiny utility cutter in his belt pouch. Not much use against anything bigger than a toaster. He waited. Then, slowly, the thing stepped into view. It was huge, at least 8 feet tall, and covered in dark, scaled skin that seemed to change color depending on the background. Its arms were long, with thick, clawed fingers. It moved with careful precision, low, to the ground, making almost no sound. Its head was narrow and long, like a reptile's, and its eyes glowed faintly in the dim light. But what froze Kale in place wasn't its size or claws, it was the eyes. They didn't look wild or mindless. They looked curious. The creature sniffed the air and tilted its head, studying the corner where Kale hid. He knew it had sensed him. His scent, his breath, the soft sound of his boots in the sand, it had picked up something. But instead of charging, it stepped back and crouched, watching. Kale did the only thing he could think of. Slowly, he stepped out from behind the wall, hands raised in peace. He didn't speak at first. He just moved carefully into the open. The creature stayed crouched, head following his every move. Its breathing was steady and deep, and when Kale looked into its eyes, he saw something he didn't expect: restraint. I'm not here to hurt you, he said gently, though he doubted the creature understood his words. Still, maybe tone mattered. More than language. The creature made a low sound in its throat, not a growl, but something softer. A rumble. Kale took that as a sign to keep going. He crouched slowly and reached into his pocket. He pulled out a small protein bar, unwrapped it, and broke it in half. With a careful motion, he placed one half on the ground between them and backed away. The creature tilted its head again, then slowly stepped forward. It sniffed the bar, poked it once with a claw, then picked it up and sniffed again. After a moment, it ate it in one bite. Then it looked at Kale and made a different sound. A click, and another. It was trying to say something. Kale watched, stunned, as the creature walked to a corner and crouched again. It dug at the base of the wall, pulling out something hidden, a small cluster of seeds or dried food. It walked back and held out a few in its clawed hand. Slowly, Kale reached out and accepted the offering. He popped one into his mouth. It was bitter, but edible. They were sharing dot above them. Kale noticed small observation windows. He could barely make out the shapes of the alien scientists and soldiers watching from behind the glass. He couldn't hear them, but he saw movement. They were taking notes, shifting uneasily. This wasn't what they had expected. He and the beast weren't fighting. They were connecting. Kale pointed to himself. "Kale," he said clearly. Creature blinked and made a series of clicks and a low, smooth tone that sounded like Rorik. Kale nodded and repeated it. Rorik. That was its name, or at least the closest sound it made to one. They sat there for a few minutes, just watching each other. The fear began to fade. Rorik wasn't a monster. He was intelligent, maybe even just as much a prisoner here as Kale was. And that changed everything. Suddenly, loud clicks echoed through the maze's speakers. A sharp crackle of energy followed, and a surge of electricity zapped both of them. Kale dropped to his knees, muscles spasming. Rorik roared in pain, his skin shifting colors wildly. The shock lasted just a few seconds, but it was enough to drive them both into the ground above. A mechanical voice crackled through the speaker. Hostility levels insufficient. Adjusting Motavan systems. Rorik looked at Kale, pain in his eyes, but also a clear message. This wasn't the first time. He knew the routine. As they both struggled back to their feet, Kale finally understood. The aliens didn't want to study survival. They wanted a fight. They were entertainment. Lab rats, but he wasn't going to give them what they wanted. He looked at Rorik and whispered, "We're not enemies. Let's show them what survival really looks like." Rorik made a deep, low sound that seemed to agree. In that quiet moment, a bond formed between two creatures who'd never been meant to meet. And everything the aliens planned was about to unravel. The ship's artificial night cycle had begun. The lights inside the maze dimmed, and a cool breeze whispered through the vents, carrying the scent of metal and chemicals. Most of the guards had left, leaving only quiet murmurs from distant hallways. That was the moment Kale and Rorik had been waiting for. It was now or never. Over the past 2 days, they had built a kind of silent language, gestures, drawings, and shared looks. It wasn't perfect, but it was enough. Rorik's claws had been useful not just for fighting, but for peeling back loose panels and prying open vent grates when no one was watching. Kale had done his part too. Whenever he spotted the thin wires of hidden cameras, he used bits of scrap to short them out or redirect their view. Slowly, they'd created gaps in the surveillance system. Tonight, they moved. Kale crouched beside a loose wall panel near the back of the maze. He checked over his shoulder. Nothing but shadow and silence. He gave Rorik a nod. The creature moved with the grace of a hunter, silent and low. With one final tug, Kale pulled the panel free, revealing a narrow maintenance tunnel, just wide enough to crawl through. Cale went in first, his shoulders scraping the metal edges. It was tight, and the air smelled of old machinery and rust. Rorik followed close behind, his larger frame making the crawl even harder, but he didn't complain. Every few meters, they paused to listen. One wrong move, one noise, and everything would fall apart. The tunnels twisted and turned in strange patterns, but Rorik had a memory like no one Cale had ever met. He had seen parts of the ship during his own capture fragments of the layout, the guard shifts, the routes technicians used. He tapped on the walls to indicate turns and danger zones. Cale followed without question. After nearly an hour of crawling, bruising and ducking through cramped spaces, they reached a small ventilation grate. Beyond it lay a quiet room glowing, with blue light filled with control panels and screens. Cale recognized it immediately. It was the communication chamber. Carefully, he loosened the grate, then dropped to the floor. Rorik landed beside him, silent despite his size. Cale moved quickly to the nearest console. The alien symbols meant nothing to him, but the system layout was familiar enough. Screens, touch panels, and blinking alerts. He could guess what most of it did. While Rorik stood watch at the door, Cale began tapping into the console. His fingers moved with the focus of a man who had once rewired his own ship, with nothing but wire cutters and stubbornness. It took time, but finally he found what he was looking for, a long-range broadcast system. He didn't try a voice message. That could get jammed. Instead, he used a simple data burst in Earth military code location data, an alert for unauthorized alien detainment, and a basic summary of the threat. With one final breath, he sent it. A soft hum confirmed the message had gone through. Relief hit Cale like a wave, but it didn't last. Rorik made a low clicking sound, the warning kind. Footsteps were coming. Cale quickly shut down the console and erased the last few commands from the screen. He scrambled back toward the vent, and they climbed just as the door opened. From behind the metal grate, they watched a Velthari technician walk in, frowning. At the screens, the alien poked at the console, but didn't seem to notice the message had been sent. After a few minutes, it left, locking the door behind it. Back in the tunnels, Rorik guided them deeper into the ship. This part was trickier. They had to crawl through a vertical shaft, climb over a fan system that almost sliced off Cale's boot, and pass dangerously close to a heat vent. But they kept going. They had a goal now. Rorik had drawn the ship's layout in the sand days earlier, and Cale remembered the details. The hangar bay where Rorik's ship was kept was 2 levels down. If they could reach it, they had a chance. Not a guarantee, but a chance. When they reached the lower level, the tunnel opened up to a high ledge. Below was the hangar. Cale gasped softly at the sight. There were several alien ships parked below, sleek, sharp, dangerous-looking, but one stood out. Smaller, silver blue, with a surface that shimmered like water under moonlight. It was Rurik's ship, but it was heavily guarded. Cale counted 6 armed Velthari and a few technicians still working on disassembled parts. The ship had been partly taken apart, exposed wiring, missing panels, and tools scattered around. They couldn't just run in. Cale studied the room, the shadows, the lighting, the energy cables. Then he saw it. Several of the Velthari ships had thick power cables running from the walls into their hulls. If he could overload the power system, just a little, it might shut down the lights, trigger alarms, and create enough confusion for them to reach the ship. He looked at Rorik and pointed to the power hub near the wall. Then he made an explosion motion with his hands. Rorik blinked, then nodded slowly. He understood. Rorik would go for the ship. Cale would handle the power. They would have only one shot. Cale took a deep breath and whispered, "Let's end this." Cale's hands trembled as he stripped wires from the power panel. Sparks flew, and the air around him buzzed with rising energy. Across the hangar, Rorik moved like a shadow, slipping between crates and machinery, his body blending with the darkness. They had planned this moment carefully, but Cale's heart still pounded like a war drum in his chest. One mistake, one wrong step, and they'd both be captured or worse. He twisted the final wire into place, held his breath, and pressed the small panel he'd rigged together. A jolt of electricity surged through the power grid, and for a second, nothing happened. Then the hangar lights exploded in a burst of sparks. Darkness fell, followed by red emergency lights flashing weakly through the gloom. Alarms screamed, voices shouted. Confusion erupted. Cale ducked low and sprinted through the chaos. Valkyrie guards scrambled to understand what was happening, their weapons raised in every direction. None of them noticed him as he weaved between cargo containers and jumped over scattered tools. By the time they saw him, it was too late. Rorik was already at his ship, pulling off panels and reconnecting vital parts with the urgency of someone who had done this in his dreams 1,000 times. Cale slid into the co-pilot's seat just as energy bolts lit up the hangar walls. One grazed the side of the ship, sending a shudder through its frame. Rorik roared, whether in pain or defiance. Cale couldn't tell, but the creature's claws moved with sharp precision. The ship's systems lit up. Controls hummed. Engines whined to life. They're going to seal the exit. Cale shouted over the noise. Rorik didn't answer, but his actions said everything. He launched the ship off the ground, pushing the engines to their limits. The hangar doors were still sealed with a glowing energy field, but Rorik fired the forward blasters at full strength. The shield flickered, cracked, and then shattered. They burst into open space, only to find a half-dozen Valkyrie fighters already chasing them. More were launching from the main vessel. The odds weren't good. Cale gritted his teeth and tried to read the ship's controls. Everything was labeled in symbols he didn't recognize, but Rorik guided his hand when needed. And then, through the dark expanse, a new light appeared. Human ships, 12 of them, arranged in battle formation. The lead vessel broadcast a message on open comms. Unknown vessel, this is Captain Eilon of the Earth Defense Ship Valor. Identify yourself. Cale grabbed the mic. This is Cale Riven. I'm the one who sent the distress signal. I've got a friendly alien with me. His name is Rorik. He helped me escape. The Valkyrie are behind us, and they're armed. There was a pause. Then, we've got you, Cale. Hold your position. We're engaging the enemy now. What followed was a storm of light and motion. The human ships opened fire, striking the Valkyrie fighters with deadly accuracy. The alien ships tried to respond, but they were uncoordinated and overwhelmed. Rorik piloted expertly, weaving through crossfire and debris until they reached the safety of the Valor's docking bay. The moment the ship touched down, human soldiers rushed in. Their weapons were drawn, eyes wide as they saw Rorik exit the cockpit. He kept his claws low and his body language calm, but the tension in the air was sharp. One wrong move, and everything they had fought for could be lost. Cale stepped in front of his alien friend. He's not the enemy, he said firmly. He's the reason I'm alive. Captain Eilon approached, a calm but cautious man with silver hair and a steady gaze. We'll need a full report, he said, nodding at Rorik. From both of you. In the briefing room, Cale told the whole story. The capture, the maze, the forced experiment. How he and Rorik had chosen not to fight, but to understand. The room was silent as he described how the Valkyrie used pain to force behavior. And how it failed. Because they underestimated what two strangers could become when trust replaced fear. Rorik sat quietly, listening. When asked to speak, he made a series of deep clicks and rumbling tones. Cale translated as best he could. He says the Velthari called his people beasts. But beasts don't share food. Beasts don't save lives. He says they're wrong. Later, standing beside a window, looking out into the stars, Kale and Rorik watched as the Velthari mothership limped away, escorted by human ships toward neutral space. Diplomats would handle the rest. But something had already changed. I think you just became the first ambassador from your people, Kale said with a grin. Not bad for a guy they called a monster. Rorik made a soft clicking sound. His kind of laughter died as the stars drifted by. Rorik pulled something from around his neck, a small emblem, dull with age. He placed it in Kale's hand. Kale looked down at it, confused. Rorik pointed to it, then to himself, and finally to Kale. Kale understood. It was a bond, not of species or blood, but of choice, of loyalty. They had both been prisoners, forced into roles they never chose. But together, they had changed the story, and somewhere out in the vast galaxy, others would hear about the human and the beast who refused to become enemies, and chose instead to become something stronger, friends.